It's Abortion Provider Appreciation Week, and our AAF team has been delivering meals and care packages to clinic staff all around the country.
And your Buzzkills have been prepping a show that features so many abortion providers who need to be honored this and every week.
That's right. I sat down with David Gunn Jr., whose father back in 1993 was the first abortion provider murdered at the hands of an anti-abortion terrorist. Abortion Provider Appreciation Week was started to honor the legacy of Dr. Gunn, and David Jr. will share the impact of his father's life and loss.
And I sat down with Dr. Victoria Williams, advocacy lead at Birthmark Doula Collective in Louisiana, an org which is suing the state for declaring medication abortion drugs a Class C controlled substance.
Then, both Moji and I had an incredible conversation with Dr. Chris Creatura and Benny Alasiarua, who are providing abortion care in two very different and important ways.
All of this and ways you can support abortion providers all the motherfucking time coming up on this episode of Feminist Buzzkills.
The show that would also spend $98 billion on lobster, but we'd put them in a tank and feed Pete Hegseth to them. I'm Liz Winstead, and I'm joined by my co-host, Moji Alawade.
Hi, I think feeding pig Hegseth to a bunch of lobsters is a responsible stewardship of taxpayer funds, and I support it.
I also didn't mention that I would set up cameras and live stream it and raise money for abortion.
And raise money for abortion, yes, as one should. And we are very excited that it's Abortion Provider Appreciation Week.
Pew, pew, pew. You know, it's one of those things that I love celebrating abortion providers, but it's the reason we have Abortion Provider Appreciation Day/week. You know, it comes from the violence that's been perpetrated on the people who provide care. So if those of you listening have said, I've never heard of Abortion Provider Appreciation Week, what is it? Well, back in 1993, I mentioned up at the billboard, Dr. David Gunn was shot walking from his car to the clinic in Pensacola, Florida, shot in the back 3 times. And it was during this heightened violence that was happening all over America. Abortion providers were being killed. There was firebombing of clinics everywhere. There was thousands of protesters were literally invading the inside of clinics and chaining themselves to waiting rooms. There was no mechanism or laws in place to protect the clinics. It was the FACE Act. And so Dr. Gunn was the first doctor to be murdered. And it started out as Abortion Provider Appreciation Day because he was executed on March 10th. And then we expanded it to not only honor those who have been killed at the hands of these extremists, but also to honor those who continue to do the work in spite of the dangers. And it's very, you know, it's just heroic work and it's incredible work. And I don't think people know enough about what abortion providers go through to make sure people get put back on the path of their own destiny.
And people absolutely do not know. I think sometimes people will hear about protesters, but I think the sense of like the profundity of the violence is largely hidden from people. And so I really love that we do take this time to acknowledge that people have died trying to just provide healthcare, and people continue to do the work, and we love and support and lift them up.
And just also too, that it's not just like little old ladies with rosaries out in front of those clinics. It's people who are sinister and people who have nefarious plans and who think they've been anointed by God to stop these abortion providers from murdering babies. And so they've surrounded themselves and created these horrible white supremacist Christian nationalist communities that basically give them a permission slip to do harm.
And so what we've been doing is showing up at clinics for 10 motherfucking years. And we bring food, we bring cheer. I love when we do landscaping stuff. That's always so satisfying and exciting for me.
Also, like, we do wacky shit.
One of my favorites, so we brought a hot tub to a clinic, and the clinic workers got to chill in a hot tub at their job. Obviously not during working time. I don't think patients want to see that. But it's just a lovely thing. And also we do things that are a lot more pragmatic. I think one of the first projects I remember when I started at AF, our programs director was hunting down a shredder, a medical grade shredder, because no one in their town that they knew of was supporting the clinic, because clinics are often ostracized by the larger business community. And so we found a shredder to come to the clinic and shred their medical documents that needed to be responsibly disposed of. I feel like those are the kind of things that really help keep clinics going. We do fun stuff, but we also do practical things that they're busy doing abortions. And so maybe we could just take some of the mental load off.
We've been on steroids with it this past month because, as we've talked about on the podcast and promoted to you, we have been out on the road with Michael Shannon and Jason Narducy's REM cover explosion. It's allowed us the opportunity to make clinic support visits along the way.
This is the third year in a row that we've done the Michael Shannon and Jason Narducci traveling REM cover band show. So they have been going around the country covering, this year it's been the Life's Rich pageant, which is an REM album. It's its 40th anniversary. And the tour launched in mid-February, and they've been at every show selling this incredible commemorative poster and donating all of the proceeds to benefit AAF's work.
And we've been at every show sort of evangelizing around abortion, explaining people about our work, and people have been so supportive. And the poster is super cute.
It's so cute.
If you're a fan of REM, this particular record they're touring has a song called Hyena on it. And so the poster itself has a drawing of a spotted hyena. And we were tabling at the show in Richmond, Virginia. And somebody told us that, first of all, apparently hyenas are a matriarchal society, which is amazing.
Very much so. Love that.
But also apparently the spotted female hyena has a pseudopenis. And when the hyena gives birth, the penis explodes. And then hyenas then are just kind of these like gender-free animals that hang out with each other. So ostensibly they're just hanging around with like the other female hyenas for the rest of their lives.
It sounds a lot like AF. It sounds like working at the Sork.
It's true.
Minus the pseudopenis.
Well, I don't know. There could be some pseudo-penises in our midst.
Fair. I haven't checked.
I'm not going to judge anybody.
There are only 3 shows left: Chicago tonight, Minneapolis, and Bloomington, Indiana. They are all sold out already. But if you have a ticket, AF colleagues and friends will be there tabling at the shows. So come by, say hi, buy a poster.
That's right. And, you know, it's not just AAF going out and doing this work we've talked about. One of the things that you should love about the work we do here is we've created programs so everyone can get out there and support clinics. And one of our favorites is our mutual aid program called Adopt a Clinic.
I know Adopt a Clinic is really great. It's a fantastic way for people in the public to support independent clinics, abortion funds, clinic escort groups, and patients directly. And what you do is you order much needed items from their Amazon wish lists.
That's right. And the wish list is at aafront.org. You can go find it under Adopt a Clinic and make a big difference. We also expose fake clinics and write positive reviews for real clinics. So if you go to exposefakeclinics.com, get together with some friends, write some Google reviews so that, you know, if somebody is searching for an abortion clinic and they don't know if it's fake or real, the Google reviews, if we get enough of them that pop up to say, if you're searching for abortion care, this place doesn't provide it. It's a really nice way to detract somebody from ending up at a fake clinic. And conversely, if you've had an abortion, you've been to an abortion clinic, you appreciate what they do, write a positive review over there so that those things can pop up, because the anti-abortion people, quite frankly, are doing the same thing we are. They're trying to write bad reviews on really good clinics. And if we can get those good reviews in, then somebody can feel safe when they see a Whole Women's Health pop up or a Toledo Women's Clinic pop up. They say, oh, this place sounds legit. People have had great experiences there. It makes me feel at ease to go and have my abortion there.
It is very much one of the ways we help each other, we support each other, and we protect each other by just being able to say, this is a real clinic, this is a fake clinic, go to the real clinic, tell the fake clinic to fuck off. Liz, also one of the things I really love is our Thank Bank program. I really, really love it. And the Thank Bank program is where we provide postcards. And usually if you come to the table, there should be some at any of the shows if you have a ticket. And you can write a supportive and encouraging message for abortion providers. And then you leave it with us, and we will take care of addressing it and mailing it, because abortion providers get hate mail. They get terrifying packages that they are maybe uncomfortable or afraid to open. But a postcard with a happy note is something they don't have to take any extra steps to appreciate. And it just reminds them that we're thinking about them and that the work they do is important and that we, the public, love them and are cheering them on.
And if you're not in a position to see us and get one of our postcards, a lot of folks around the country have been getting together with friends and getting some wine and buying an assortment of really beautiful postcards to send and writing them out and mailing them. If you go to the Thank Bank tab under all of our volunteer activities on the website, you'll be able to see the kind of notes. You'll be able to get a list of clinics of where to send them. So either grab some of ours and do it at our table, or Get some postcards that you think are really meaningful and write the note that you think is great to maybe clinics just in your local area. So you can check out our website to find out all other kinds of ways that you can help out abortion providers. And if you need help navigating because you're like, I'm lost, the easiest thing to do is you can just email programs@aafront.org and we will walk you through how to best utilize your skills because sometimes it's confusing.
Yeah, it's good to have support. It's nice to have someone hold your hand. Also, Liz, the Oscars are this weekend.
That's right. You can do some support while watching the Oscars. What? Tell them about it, Moj.
Oh, this is really exciting. So, the Oscars are this weekend, and nominated for Best Documentary Short Film is a film called The Devil is Busy. It's a documentary about the Feminist Center for Reproductive Liberation in Atlanta, Georgia. And it's a day in the life of one of the people who works there named Tracy. She's the head of security. She is incredible. It is such a touching documentary. It's also only 30 minutes. So it doesn't have to be a huge commitment, but it really is powerful. I found it really emotional, Liz.
I did too. You know, that she is a spiritual person. She brings her whole self and whole heart to every patient that comes through. And it really tells the story that often doesn't get shared about how wonderful people who provide this care are. Kwajalein Jackson, the executive director of this particular clinic, is a dear friend of Abortion Access Front. We've serviced and helped provide clinic support to her clinic many times in Atlanta. She's been a guest on this podcast. She's on Operation Save Abortion. She's really part of our team and where we like to throw our support so hard. So definitely watch the Oscars and root for these folks. And in an upcoming podcast, we're actually going to be talking to Tracy and Kwajalein about the film and about their work under all these oppressive laws in Georgia. So that's going to be a must listen as well.
Watch it on HBO. I don't know if I said that before, but that's where you can watch it. It's pretty simple if you have access. Plug in again, 30 minutes, very well spent.
Totally.
And finally, if you want to support this pod, if you have been listening to Moji and Liz and are like, those women are great. Well, you can support us and all the work we do at AAF by joining our Patreon. If you're not already a Patreon, just sign up. Not only will you get a birthday shout out and some cool merch, you'll also support this incredible content and maybe some fun experiences. Like I said, all pledges support this pod and all of our activism at Abortion Access Front. Pledge at patreon.com/feministbuzzkills and get it popping.
Yeah, get it popping. Because you know what? We don't want to do OnlyFans for abortion. We shouldn't have to. I mean, maybe we would. But I just, I can barely get lipstick on to do the pod.
All right, Liz, let's get to some appreciating of some abortion providers.
I agree. We're going to start this love fest now. When we talked about how we wanted to structure what this episode would be like, Moji and I and Jin and Remy were like, it's really, really important for us to not only frame what Abortion Provider Appreciation Week looks like, but really kind of dive into the origins of why it exists, right? So we're going to kick off the show talking about Dr. David Gunn. And I am so thrilled to be joined by his son, David, who is going to talk about his dad and the legacy that his dad has left behind. Hey, David, it's so good to see you.
Hey, Liz, how are you? Good to see you as well.
I think we're all doing what we can at this point, right? What is good? What is relative? It's all, what is time? What are laws? The whole thing.
Right. Surviving cruelty.
Surviving cruelty is the number one. This week is it's a bittersweet week often, because it started out as Abortion Provider Appreciation Day and now Abortion Provider Appreciation Week to honor the life of your dad, Dr. David Gunn Sr., who, for those that don't know, on March 10th, 1993, was murdered by an evil anti-abortion monster as your dad walked from his car into his clinic in Pensacola, Florida.
Right. Yes. Shot in the back 3 times, hiding in the bushes all morning, waiting for my dad to get there. And he knew what time he'd be there because they had been distributing wanted posters with my dad's schedule posted.
Yeah.
Just to give some context, he worked in 3 different clinics across the Southeast. He worked in Georgia, Alabama, and Florida Panhandle because it was increasingly difficult to find anyone to take the risk to work those places and serve those patients.
Yeah, and I think, David, it's important if you would, because your dad was not killed in a vacuum. The environment in the late 80s and early 90s was volatile for people who were providing abortion care.
Oh, it was volatile everywhere. I mean, that's when Waco happened, which is what teed up the Murrow building. So, I mean, like a whole season of right wing terror started in almost March 10th, 1993.
Yeah, for sure. And clinics were being firebombed. Doctors were really targeted.
Absolutely. It was horrible. And I mean, and you could call the local police and tell them, look, this is what our staff are experiencing. But it was kind of look the other way and we're not really going to do much about that. And then, someone ends up dead.
Yeah.
How many more people have to end up dead before, we start taking right wing terrorism seriously?
We're still asking that question.
Well, and that's what's so infuriating about it. You would think that things would progress, not regress. And it's just been one mass regression. I can't think of a time ever where we've taken rights away from people that have existed for generations.
When I think about that, and you having had this experience in 1993, years after Roe v. Wade was supposedly settled law. And as Roe v. Wade fell, I'm wondering if you had any observations around what that escalation of violence has felt for you to watch it sort of regress back to the bad old days.
What I found funny over the last 8 months or so of the Trump administration is, all of a sudden, people start protesting Sarah Huckabee Sanders at a restaurant while she's out with her family. Or someone shows up at Brett Kavanaugh's house with a weapon, which is horrid and inexcusable. And I don't support that in any way, shape, or form, condone it. But my point is, in those instances, which, if you recall, they were clutching pearls and on the fainting couch with their reaction when someone did this, they finally got to understand what doctors deal with and what clinic workers deal with and what their patients deal with every day outside these clinics.
That's right. And, like you said, your dad was shot in the back 3 times walking from his car to the clinic. Dr. Slepian was killed in his kitchen making soup. Dr. Tiller was murdered in his church. And where was the pearl clutching then?
Yeah, there wasn't. The pearl clutching was, we're having a celebration on the front yard while my dad's dying in the backyard, of the clinic. And it wasn't just limited to that local organization. It was nationwide. People had that, well, this is a defensive action and it's justifiable homicide. And, I am sorry about what happened to your dad, David, but there were X amount of babies that weren't killed today, all that kind of gamut.
And I think people need to know that in 1993, there was a massive document that was signed that was called the Defense of Murder Act. And basically what it said was to these anti-abortion extremists who signed it, that you have an obligation to defy the laws of man and murder abortion providers and anyone who is going against the laws of God. They were given a permission slip by God to harm people like your dad.
Because, he was just Dr. Mangala's, what Paul Hill told me, who went on to murder 2 people himself. And who was, very instrumental in that defensive action movement that you're talking about.
Yeah.
The right wing finally got a taste of what it's like to live in, around, or love someone who has anything to do with abortion services, and they didn't like it at all. they were repelled by it and were highly vocal about it. And on January 6th, the only thing I kept thinking of was, that's what it looks like at abortion clinics every morning. That's what these folks have to deal with, who are just trying to get up every morning and go to work. And it's those exact people, the same people who are rioting the Capitol, are the same people who are murdering doctors.
We have a big scheming plan. We have joined their churches clandestinely on Facebook and gone through. And so when January 6th happened, Abortion Access Fund had a team of people who were immediately going to find out who was there. And we got screenshots and video and posts of 30 of the anti-abortion movement who were there and reported them to the FBI. And then the rub in all of that is, in the course of us doing our work to get convictions of people who were invading clinics, blocking clinic entrances, Trump pardoned all them. That's the thing that went underground. We heard about all the J6ers be pardoned, but the 23 people that were convicted on federal charges for harming abortion providers, they also got pardoned, right?
Well, and that's what worries me with Michael Griffin in Florida. It keeps me up at night thinking about whether or not DeSantis might parole him.
Well, let's talk about that. Michael Griffin is the name of the person who killed your father. And on top of you having to mourn the loss of your father and advocating to make sure that providers are more protected, you have also had to go time and time again to the parole board because there's been real chances that this asshole would be paroled. Talk about that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, after you've served your sentence, for lack of a better term, in the state of Florida, you're due for a parole hearing every 7 years. Doesn't mean that they grant it. You're just due one by law, due process. So the first one that Michael Griffin was eligible for hearing-wise was in 2018, and you helped me organize some folks to write to the parole commission to talk about how dangerous it is to even consider parole for him, much less giving him a platform to talk about his vile beliefs. But that's neither here nor there. We went and attended this hearing in 2018. The parole commission decided, because of a number of factors related to my dad's death, he had polio, so he was considered a at-risk victim because he was shot in the back, and because the Griffin hiding, they gave more credence to the premeditation aspect. And then because he couldn't run because of his leg, they added like 42 years to Griffin's sentence for those aggravating factors in 2018. We find out in 2024 that he's due for another parole hearing, but that he has a presumptive release date this time of spring of 2026.
I remember getting that call from you telling me that, and I was like, holy what?
And so when we start digging into it and we get lawyers involved and we start getting documents in, we find out that they held a second hearing for Griffin about 2 months after the hearing that my sister and I and my aunt all attended and testified at, that they held this second hearing just to listen to Michael Griffin's supporters. And under this second hearing that my sister nor I nor anyone with the family was notified about, they removed all of those aggravating factors.
Who did they have testifying for him?
It was someone within the Florida Correction Department. This is where it gets really interesting. The dude who they quoted, who ended up being his parole kind of liaison in the prison, who he would interview with, started at the same prison where Michael Griffin was sentenced in 94. So they grew up in that prison together. He's now like at the time all this was going on, he was a warden of that prison at that point. And he's the one who's saying, yeah, I think he should be, eligible for release in 2026.
Do you think he was like some part of that whole movement?
It has to have been.
Right.
So anyway, we went down and testified again. It was horrible because here we are looking at the possibility he could be released in a year with what we're hearing. And, we went down, we testified, told him that as long as he's alive, Griffin, and I don't believe in the death penalty, didn't ask for it, don't think it should be applicable, but I also don't want the guy to get parole, and as long as he's alive, we deal with my dad's death every day because we were asked about it. I don't mind talking about it. It's not the issue. It's just, it never goes away.
Do you feel confident after this last conversation you had with the parole board that Michael Griffin will not see the light of day?
I mean, I'm never going to say I'm confident. I'm cautiously optimistic. How about that?
Okay, that works.
I mean, I think that they're trying to make right a big, huge wrong. I mean, on that paperwork, when they're deliberating about removing these factors, and they're not supposed to talk about their deliberations with one another outside of a hearing, one of the women commissioners wrote, "Do not tell the victims." So we have on paper them telling one another not to say anything to us about what they're doing behind closed doors when they're voting to take 42 years off of his sentence that were, logically and justifiably applied.
Yeah, I mean, it is Florida, let's be honest. So let's talk about your dad, because I've talked to you about your dad. I work with so many people who loved your dad. Tell folks who your dad was as a guy and as a dad.
He was one of the strongest people I knew. I said earlier, he had polio when he was a child, lost complete use of one of his legs, but that didn't stop him from playing baseball as a kid, being almost an Eagle Scout, growing up as a boy. He learned how to drive a stick shift. How you do that with one leg.
Wow.
With a manual clutch back in, 65. I have no idea, but I mean, he was able to do it. And the thing that gets lost, I think, on a lot of providers is we focus so much on the abortion side. We tend to not even consider what other experiential things they did over the course of their career. I mean, my dad was a fertility specialist. I mean, he didn't just do abortions. He helped women who wanted to have babies, bring babies into the world. He wanted to help people.
Yeah, people often forget that these incredible doctors do a comprehensive and compassionate care in all levels of reproductive health care.
Absolutely. Not that there's anything wrong if you just did abortions, but there's nothing wrong with either. My point is, these are complex human beings, just like this is a complex issue, and it's best left to people who can, consider nuance and, a little just old-fashioned compassion in talking about these things, and trust the doctor and trust the patient because they know best.
Those are beautiful words to go by. And I'm so grateful for you for sharing your time and your story, especially since this entire week of appreciation was born out of us being able to get to know who your dad was as a doctor and a provider and a human, and also just the fact that his life was so tragically taken. What would you say to our listeners as we are looking at this Abortion Provider Appreciation Week, but like every day, like how can they show up for people who are providing this kind of care?
I mean, look, you can talk to your local escorts, talk to your local abortion funds. If you don't feel comfortable on the front lines, if there's a clinic to protect, there are things that you can do inside to get active, stuff envelopes, which we don't really do anymore, stuff virtual envelopes.
Yeah.
Call people. The best thing to do is get on the phone and actually talk to people.
You can't deny their humanity when you're having a heart-to-heart conversation.
That's right. And if we just would talk to each other, I think we'd get to the position that makes sense more times than not. It's just we can't talk to each other anymore.
David, thank you so much for joining us on this important week. I always love seeing you, and I always love talking to you.
I absolutely. Thanks so much for thinking of me and including me.
Liz, it was so heartbreaking to hear that his family has to endure so much.
Moji, when he called us back in 2018, when Michael Griffin was first up for parole, and he said that nobody in the movement had reached out to him, that's where I really realized we have a lot of work to do. And it was really great to be able to rally people in the movement who didn't know, and everybody, when they found out, jumped into place and wrote letters to the parole board and really helped support them in that journey. But yeah, like it's bad enough to have your dad assassinated, but then to live in an environment now where criminals and the white supremacists that are doing the killing on behalf of God are literally have advocates and are being pardoned. Like it's what are laws anymore, right? So yeah, it was just really great to hear him and to remind people that community is what we have and community is how we need to just develop and be, which is why we do what we do.
That is why we do what we do. That's why AAF exists. That's why Abortion Provider Appreciation Week exists.
And why our fucking movement never seems to stop fighting tirelessly.
We can't stop. But fighting tirelessly doesn't stop amazing people from keeping at it. And our next guest is actually another incredible tireless advocate. She's a trained doula who works to advance maternal health and policy in New Orleans as an advocacy director and member owner of Birthmark Doula Collective. And that's an org that is challenging Louisiana's law that has classified Miffy and Miso, the two drugs in the abortion pill protocol, as dangerous drugs. We're going to talk more about that. Please welcome Dr. Victoria Williams. Hi, Dr. Victoria. How are you doing?
Wonderful.
I'm so glad that you joined me today, this Abortion Provider Appreciation Week. And we're just going to jump right into it. Can you talk about Birthmark Doula Collective and the ways that you serve the community there?
Absolutely. Birthmark is a 15-year now company. We've been around in the community doing direct service related to doulas and lactation and also advocacy. Those are our three pillars. It was started by Latona Giwa and Dana Karen, who are now our co-founders, as an ideal around doulas in a collective, right? They were parents who were working. They were like, well, we can't do this alone. And leadership is difficult by yourself. So why don't we start our doula collective? And what that means is that we have a set number of member owners. I am one of them, and we own a portion of this company. And so we have been on the grounds, also running a business, also building a plane while we're flying it right here in New Orleans.
It's exciting to hear about different models of community care. And so I was really excited about this member owner title, which, sounds like a cooperative. But can you talk about why you all or the founders chose to organize around this model of care and what are the benefits?
The division of labor, I think when you get into this work, you realize that sometimes you're working in a silo, and that is not community-based, right? We don't want to work in a silo. We want to have all hands on deck as much as possible. And so it was a collective of doulas. I actually started as a volunteer. I was a parent going to one of their lactation programs, Cafe Olay, which is a breastfeeding group for women of color. So the collective model was just built on shared leadership, shared ownership, really creating sustainability in the doula work, because we know that doulas just work, right? We just want to do the work on the ground. We're not necessarily thinking about how much it costs or how it affects our families. We just want to serve the community. So being that there's also a high burnout in community-based work, the collective model seemed to suit us at the time.
Yeah, community work is definitely, I feel like, often run by people who just roll up their sleeves and jump in and not necessarily think about the long-term impact on themselves and sustainability. What was your personal journey to becoming a birth doula?
At the age of 19, I had a beautiful daughter who is now 20. So my journey started very early as being like one of those friends who basically, once you have a baby early, everybody kind of comes to you. I've done a myriad amount of baby showers, baby consultations very early on in my career. But here in Louisiana, my work really morphed after I became a master's social worker at Tulane. I got my master's. And so moving into the hospital social work, working in labor and delivery, it really continued to open my eyes that people are lacking support around, I say, three areas: when you get married, when you have a baby, and when someone dies. The support is lackluster. Nobody knows what to do. So I found Birthmark in 2013, and I went to one of their informationals about becoming a doula. And I was like, okay, I've been doing this. Yeah, this is me. So that's pretty much how I got into it. And then over the course of having other children, breastfeeding became my rah-rah. I breastfed my daughter, both of them, the little ones, 10 and 7, for over 3 years. Then started programs related to maternal health. Everybody knew me as like program coordinator who creates program around maternal health. So that's how I got back into Birthmark. And yeah, my journey has really morphed because now I'm in advocacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've seen so many families. I always say I'm a retired doula, retired lactation consultant, because most of my work is built in advocacy and writing legislation related to maternal health.
I'm also a fellow extended breastfeeder. It's shockingly fun if you get into it. For some people, for me, not for everyone, but for some people, it can get shockingly fun. I was, when thinking about chatting with you, really sat in the seat of someone listening to this podcast about abortion, and I could see someone asking why I'm choosing to talk to a birth doula that lives in an abortion hostile state on the pod right now. And you and I know that abortion, birthing, miscarriage, parenting, all of these are interrelated in the spectrum of reproductive potential, reproductive experience, and that there's a lot of overlap in care and care protocols. So abortion is banned in Louisiana, but But can you talk about what ways you as a provider and or Birthmark Doula Collective as an organization relate to abortion care?
It has affected Birthmark in a way of, as a business, being able to see our doulas basically not struggle, but have confusion around language and words and like what I can say, what I can't say. So then it impacts our clients because doulas are non-medical, but we provide education, comfort measures, labor and delivery support, C-section support, all the whole gambit of reproductive health, right? And so not being able to kind of verse our clients on all the different scenarios, right, because of fear of legalities. We do have like a snitch law.
Bounty hunter laws.
Yes, like we do. We have it here. Literally, a bill was passed that like your mother-in-law can sue you if she found out you had an abortion, which is crazy.
Also, why is it her business? Why is it anybody else's business?
That part. So I think that talking to us and understanding that even though we are an abortion ban state, people still go through reproductive experiences. People are still going to either decide or not decide. That's what reproductive justice is. They can decide whether they want to or not, or people have real reasons, health reasons, all types of things that cause them to have a spontaneous miscarriage.
And one of the things that I found interesting looking at your site is that you accept insurance. And you've said here that doula care is not medical care, although obviously it's healthcare adjacent. It helps people with their health, both physical health and mental and emotional health. How does that work? Because I think that people may not know that this is a thing your insurance might cover.
Right. I mean, let's talk about that. That was one of the bills that we introduced in 2021 or 22 around doula reimbursement. Before doula reimbursement kicked on, listen, Louisiana is not first at nothing.
First at gumbo, first at gumbo.
You know, we adjacent to Mardi Gras, like we have our thing. King cake only comes from here. You get the second line only here. But when it comes to health, we are elf in everything. But just hear me out. Louisiana was one of the first places to lobby for insurance-based doula care and for private insurance. So our private insurers were first. From that, we then had to create a Louisiana Doula Registry Board, which I am the board chair. And so all that is saying that our doulas, they wanted to create some form of a legitimacy in our work. So they're like, well, you know, who controls the doulas? We're like, nobody. We're community-based. And so we created a registry. All that does is that a doula is able to register and say, I'm a doula. I practice in these ways, and I would like to be a insurance provider. I would like to provide insurance for my services. And so once you're registered, you're then able to be credentialed by now Medicaid and private insurers.
Nice.
Even though our services are sliding scale. And the great thing about that is that our doulas don't have to focus on the paperwork. I said we're always combining clinical with community, which is always kind of a disaster. And so our doulas don't have to do the credentialing. We do it for them, and then we pay them up front, and we're able to, you know, do the billing later.
Has that made it easier for patients to access your services? Has that made any change in sort of the way you see people seeking out or using doulas in their care?
Yeah, I think that was the main reason for us thinking about this bill and moving forward with it, was we're thinking about rural areas that don't have much access. You know, hospitals are closing, you know, due to the ban, due to a lot of things, but definitely the time that a person finds out they're pregnant and then tries to go to a hospital could be 30, 34, 5 minutes, you know, depending on what type of hospital facility. So you just need that in between. I think doulas, we do that. We're the question answerer, the comforter. And so having that access in rural areas allows more people to have access to proper maternal care, which is so important in those first couple of weeks.
As you said earlier in this conversation, birth, parenting, death, like all of these things are things that the way society is structured right now in the US, a lot of us, most of us don't have either the support, the education, the know-how to just know how to do these things, right? We're so siloed. I think, you know, one could think in more traditional societies, perhaps you saw these things up close a little more. I had my child later in life, and my siblings had all had children, and I still felt like I was floundering that first year.
Absolutely. And I also want to mention that people think, oh, I had a doula with my first birth, or people always put doulas in the crunchy, you have to be doing a home birth type of thing.
Right. Yeah.
No. Any reproductive experience, I say fertility, all the way down to deciding what type of birth control you need. Finding a doctor, I think that a doula can help with all of those things. And
love this part of the conversation. We're just going to move to something a little darker. In 2024, Louisiana legislators reclassified mifepristone and misoprostol as dangerous controlled substance. For people who are not up on it, these are the two medications that are used in the standard medication abortion protocol, but they're also used in so many other things involving one's reproductive health and care, including miscarriage management, birth. Can you explain this law and the impact that it's had on providers and patients in Louisiana?
yeah, so basically, they classify this drug nearly the same as like controlled substance, meaning that you get addicted to it.
So like drugs.
Like drugs, like a dangerous substance, which is wild because, like you said, it's not just about birthing. Like these drugs also cover, I just recently found out, like people who have gastro problems, they also take the same drug.
Also, it doesn't get you high.
No, it doesn't get you high. And it's not every day that you would take it. And it's really not a fun process. Either whether you're taking it to insert your IUD or whether you're taking it to dilate your cervix or whatever, it's not something about somebody, hey, you got some of that miso?
Exactly. It's Friday night. Less miso. So what has the impact of this law been on, again, people in Louisiana? Because it's been about a year of implementation at this point.
But think about possession and distribution of this medicine having a fine of 5 years and up to $5,000, right? And so our doctors and our birth workers are like, that's insane. And they don't want to take the risk. So what has happened is that you call and say you're pregnant. There are some doctors, they won't take you before 12 weeks or before 18 weeks.
What?
Yeah, there are some doctors that won't see you.
Anything could happen in that time. It's an unstable time in a pregnancy.
It is. If something happens, I don't want to have to write abortion or miscarriage or spontaneous abortion, because spontaneous abortion is a miscarriage if nobody knows, right? And they write that. They have to write it. So I think it has impacted, number one, caused confusion. It has impacted the way that we provide service. And we have lots of providers who are leaving. Our medical students can't even see an abortion done in the state of Louisiana. They have to go outside of Louisiana to do their residency and then come back.
They're not coming back.
No, we're losing them. We're losing it.
Yeah. So Birthmark Doula Collective is currently challenging that law. Why did you decide that you were the ones to bring that challenge?
I think Birthmark is a very unique organization, being that we're an LLC currently and we have a fiscal agent. And so we can say Black, we can say equity, we can say all the words, right? We're not controlled by like a government grant or federal funding. And so I think that we were attractive in that manner, but also as a business who hires doulas, and we are all doulas at the table, I think that we were also attracted to the way that this also affects our workforce as a whole. Look, and also they asked me, and if you ask me anything, I'm going to go for it. I'm like, yep.
You're one of those gung-ho people.
Yeah, we going to rock the boat? Huh, yes. Put the smoke up? Yep, I'm ready.
I'm wondering, because I actually haven't talked to a medical professional in Louisiana since the law has been in effect. I know doula is not medicalized care, but do you just now not have access to this medication? Is it under lock and key? Is there just, you just can't send people home to do their 4 pills?
There is a protocol that we don't, because we're non-medical, we're not privy to, but there will always be a delay in service because they have to get a script. It has to be medically necessary. There are all these things that have to happen before you say, yes, go. So I think that that's pretty much it. There's a new protocol in these hospitals. It is not all the way down in the dungeon of the pharmacy. It is close, but there still has to be a procedure followed before it's enacted.
Which is a delay in care and potentially extended suffering for patients.
Exactly.
Well, it's Abortion Provider Appreciation Week, and that's a time where we all try to celebrate and uplift providers. And I love that we're having this conversation and really recognizing that doulas are an important part of the provider space. Can you talk and just leave on a high note by talking about an experience or an element of your work that gives you joy?
Yes, one of the things that gives me joy in this work is, number one, seeing families who just randomly come up to me and are like, oh my gosh, or they hear I work for Birthmark. Oh, one of your doulas was my doula. Or someone, actually, I was at a conference this weekend and she said, I think that you talked to me about breastfeeding and you like really helped me during the pandemic. I said, was it over screen? Well, definitely. We that was me. So that just that joy of knowing that somebody was helped. And sometimes in this work, you need to know that's one person. If it's just one, I'm thankful for those flowers. And two, I am thankful that I get to create a space that uplifts Black and Brown experiences that our birth workers and families and advocates get to benefit from. And that space is Black Birth Matters, which is a conference that we host. And so that space is just, it's so beautiful because it's not about doom and gloom. We're there to uplift the advocates and the ones who have been doing this work. I take the Harriet Tubman approach. They didn't care about who was president and whatever was going on around that time. I don't either. The work will still be going. This train will still move.
So how can people support Black Birth Matters?
On our website, this year we'll be celebrating 10 years. 10 years of creating spaces for uplifting the Black experience, but also for our advocates to have a space to like feel convene and be and feel spirited. So this year is being October and we have a website, birthmarkdoulas.com/Black Birth Matters.
That is incredible. I'm actually really excited about that. I am so excited that you came and joined me today, Dr. Victoria Williams. I would love it if you could tell, I mean, you just gave the website, but also tell people where they can find you or your organization on socials and anything else that people can do to support and uplift the work that you are doing.
Yeah, I always say that this work, these bans and what we're experiencing in this time, we need people who have 10, 20, 30-year investments because this is not just affecting us or this generation. These are generations to come that will feel this raft of our reproductive health. And so donations are always needed.
Hell yeah.
So at Birthmark Doulas with an S is our main page on all platforms. And then at Black Birth Matters is a separate entity that we showcase our conference on.
We're going to make sure all of this is in the show notes and try to get that support. I'm so excited to talk to you, and I'm so grateful that you came and spoke to me about the doula work happening in Louisiana. It's so exciting, and I'm really happy to hear about it.
And you can also follow at Victoria the Doc to learn more about what we're doing in this. I always say I'm pushing policy, no matter what it is.
Because policy is what will help us. And policy is what will save us. And our failure so far is allowing policy to basically run away without us and lead us places we don't need to go.
And the great thing is that I'm advocating for those who can't be there. Our doulas don't have the time to be there. They tell me, and I go there. And so Victoria the Doc, you can find out all the great things that we're doing.
Thank you, Victoria the Doc. I'm so excited you came by.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
Liz, there isn't enough inclusion of the work that birth doulas do in the abortion space or in the reproductive space. And I really love talking with Dr. Victoria about the ways that the patients are supported in Louisiana, even though there are all kinds of bans around abortion there.
You know, that's why I love this episode so much, because we are including these very abortion providers and abortion, people who are in the space that you don't think of. And I don't even know how many people know about birth doulas, never mind abortion doulas, right? So I think that just hearing from her and also just her legal advocacy work that she's doing is really incredible. I just watched a TikTok of some doulas who were thrown out of a hospital because the hospital said they were interfering with care. And so again, just not recognizing how community really helps support abortion and also helps support birth is a very good reminder. That was a wonderful interview, Moji.
And also, overly medicalized care really does sometimes exclude the patient, right? And we know, and we talk to people all the time, we know that abortion care can be safely done using several different methods, and you can do it in person with a medical professional through virtual care, or you can self-manage through pills through the mail. All these are ways that sort of center the patient or allow the patient to allow where they want to be centered. And this Abortion Providers Appreciation Week, we wanted to talk about some of these other methods of care. And our next guests are abortion providers who offer these different models and are excited to talk about them.
Yes, these are two badasses. Dr. Chris Creatura is a New York-based OBGYN, abortion provider, and assistant professor of obstetrics and gynecology, menopause, and sexual medicine at Weill Cornell Medical College.
And Vinny Alasiurua is the executive director of Women on Web, a feminist nonprofit organization based in Canada that offers safe access to abortion pills to 180 countries. Please welcome Dr. Creatura and Vinny Alasiurua. Chris, Vinny, thank you for coming.
Hello.
We're so excited to have this conversation with you both. You both approach abortion provision in different ways. And so, Chris, we're just going to start with you. You're a traditional OBGYN. And what we love is your commitment to treating abortion care as part of just standard OBGYN care, just a normal part of our pregnancy options, which honestly should be every doctor's philosophy. It isn't always. Can you talk about what inspired you to become an OBGYN? And what was it along your journey to get here that informed your outlook?
Oh, thanks so much for that question. I've never had anybody attribute that word traditional to me before. So I'm not sure if I'm going to say thank you, but it does feel novel.
Just this once.
I did become a gynecologist in fairly traditional ways. And I did it really because I wanted to address female suffering. I wanted really to counter the normalization of the cultural acceptance of female pain, the violence against women, the ignorance of things that don't affect men in the medical profession. So that's what got me interested in this work. But I also think that at a very early age, I recognized that my gender did put me at risk, and living in the world as a female was a risky proposition. And that realization was amplified by the simultaneous arrival of puberty in Ms. Magazine, and really hit it home for me that there was really a problem with gender. And that very first year, the year that Roe happened, was also a year that Ms. published a really important photograph of a woman in my home state who had died as a result of an illegal abortion. And she was my parents' age. She lived nearby, and she had a terrible, unnecessary, preventable death. And the injustice of that kind of experience just seemed impossible to fathom in 1973 when things were so positive. They seemed to be running in a positive direction. So I read every issue, and I felt like that was my mission, to become a physician that would take care of women and make sure that they got what they needed. So I feel like that's kind of what set me off on my journey.
Wow. It's incredible that at age 12 you had that gut reaction, and I'm just gobsmacked that as you tell that story, we could look at the calendar right now in, 2026 and read that same article and have. And so it's just maddening. Benny, I think sort of the same question goes to you. You are not a physician, but your organization, Women on Web, is also normalizing abortion provision in a different way. And so talk a little bit about how you came to this work and your approach of care.
My path to abortion is a bit unconventional, untraditional. So my background is in international development. And for 10, 15 years almost, I worked in a number of health-related projects around the world, Ukraine, India. My last project was in Laos PDR. And they always intersected with reproductive health, but I never worked exclusively on abortion. And like you said, I don't have medical training myself. And just before Women on Web, I was actually working for a tech nonprofit. And it's a nonprofit that's protecting human rights defenders online who are threatened by censorship, surveillance, internet shutdowns. And that was the reason why I found out about Women on Web. Because Women on Web is a very interesting and famous case study in the internet freedom circles because our websites are censored around the world. From there on, I found Women on Web and I joined Women on Web about 6 years ago.
Well, actually, can you tell us, what does Women on Web do?
We are a Canadian nonprofit organization, a feminist nonprofit organization that facilitates online access to abortion pills. And at any given moment, the service is open in 180 countries, including the US. And in the last 20 years, we turned 20 last year, we've done over 160,000 abortions. So basically what happens is care seekers can come onto our website, they do an online consultation. We ask a few questions around their medical history. The consultations are there to screen for contraindications. And if there is none, the care seeker is prescribed with abortion pills. Then prescription is filled in a pharmacy and the pharmacy dispenses the drugs and sends them in envelopes to people's home addresses. We have a wonderful help desk team answering questions 24/7 in 16 different languages. Just, helping through the process. Sometimes it's just logistics, but then also to support people on information on how to use the pills, what to expect afterwards, and when to seek medical care.
Liz and I talk a lot about how advocacy around abortion pills often does a disservice because they kind of downplay the bleeding and the cramping, and people say like, oh, it feels like having a heavy period. It's normal to bleed and cramp. I guess we feel like part of what leads to criminalization is people don't know what to expect. And so then they find themselves in hospital settings and can be, persecuted for that in some way. Can you talk about what's normal? How do you share with people what's normal in cramping, bleeding, kind of when people should look for medical intervention? Or what are the ways that your organization makes sure people are informed with the information they have so that they know what to expect?
Yeah, so before I even answer the core of your question, I think I just want to preface my answer by just emphasizing how safe and how simple it is to self-manage your own abortion. The pills are safer than many of the over-the-counter medicines that we all know of. It's safer than carrying a pregnancy to term. But I appreciate the question. It's really, really important. It's really, really important for our care seekers to understand what's normal bleeding, what's normal cramping, and really spot if they are having a complications, which are rare. For some, the cramping, they say that it feels like a really heavy, intense period. But for others, it is much more intense. And it's very important for us, and we feel like it's our responsibility to make sure that we prepare people for both scenarios. So over the last year, we've been demedicalizing a lot of our medical content, our communication, our help desk scripts. And part of that process, when we've been reviewing all our emails that we're sending to care seekers, a lot of the times we've been trying to simplify them and remove a lot of unnecessary information so that the information is accessible. But something that we ended up adding to the emails is actually information around pain management. Just for the reason that I just said, that people are prepared and they have the right information with them to recognize if they're actually having a complication.
I think this is a really important issue in the United States right now because there are so-called scientific studies that are being presented, and they're actually kind of skewed because of the way that we are reporting something as a complication, right? A person who needs to speak with somebody to get advice is not having a complication. They're just seeking some advice. And that's been listed in a very poorly designed study as a complication of medical abortion and teleabortion. And it's really a misconstrual of the data. So, science is always impacted by who's allowed to do it. And there's no question that if we have people who are pregnancy capable and they are deciding on how to do the science and they are supportive of how the medication works and understand that they need to convey to people who are using these medications how they work and what to expect, that we're going to have very different outcomes than if we don't educate anyone about their medicine. That's true with every kind of medical intervention that we make. You have to set expectations. And I think that anyone who tells somebody that having an abortion is like having a period is not really setting expectations properly.
Right.
But like Benny's point has already been made, the most important thing is that this is incredibly safe. And we do have a great deal of data that supports its safety, its utility, and also its ability to reach so many more women who wouldn't normally be able to save their lives and get this life-saving, life-changing care if we didn't have this technique.
And I think, to your point, Chris, just to put a button on it, that is part of the stigma. I feel like our movement has done such a disservice to just really talk honestly about abortion because we're afraid that the other side will be able to hold it against us. But tell me what medical intervention does not have pain or bleeding or physical therapy or a whole bunch of stuff that you need to go through to feel good. I mean, you're not going to the spa.
We need to trust women. We need to trust them that with good information, they're able to understand what's happening to their bodies and what they need to do afterwards. So for us, it comes down to trust too, just like providing accessible, straightforward information that's transparent, truthful. And then it's just up to us trusting them.
And that trust is being removed not just from the women who need abortions, but also it's being removed from the way that the public views their healthcare providers. Because when we create situations with healthcare bans where we're in a situation where people can't discuss their healthcare with people who could help them, we also rupture the trust between healthcare providers and people who need the care.
When we're looking at how the anti-abortion movement has infiltrated medical schools, and when you hear med students talk about how they're not getting training on abortion care and miscarriage management, which are often the same, they sometimes don't even know what an abortion should be if somebody presents and says, I've taken pills and this kind of thing. So it's a disservice all around, is my point.
All right, so Vinny, one of the biggest barriers to abortion care in general is the cost of accessing care. And I know also part of the work that you're doing is to help abortion more affordable. Can you talk about how Women on Web has accomplished this and also what more needs to be done?
Yeah, it's what we've accomplished, but I think there's a lot of learnings that you can draw from our experience too. So one way of making medication abortion affordable is simply provided remotely. Like having a medication abortion or providing it doesn't need very complicated infrastructure. It reduces obviously the need to have an appointment, visit a clinic, interact with healthcare providers. Another way of thinking about how to make abortion more affordable is to kind of expand the pool of who is a legitimate abortion provider. It can be midwives, it can be nurses, it can be community health workers. And in a lot of the places where we operate, it's feminist networks. And we like to also consider that the abortion seeker itself, when they're self-managing their own abortion, they become their own abortion provider. So it's really like just rethinking completely who is an abortion provider. And something very specific to us and the way we operate our service is that we always provide access to generic pills. And that's a way of keeping costs low. And it's also sending a message that this is not supposed to be an expensive service. This is not supposed to cost a lot of money. Like, this is basic healthcare and ideally should be free and legal. And any barrier, whether it's cost or whether it's regulation, that's just wrong. And there's alternatives out there. So with the generic pills, for example, in the US, we are asking people to donate $120 only towards the service. And a lot of the times people cannot donate at all. And that's completely fine. Like, we never had to turn anybody away because we're able to keep the costs low. And at the same time, there's always somebody who's able to donate a little bit more on the US or other countries where we're operating. And that way they're supporting the people who cannot afford it all. So it's kind of like a feminist international solidarity in play here.
I really love the phrasing you had of sort of the abortion seeker becomes their own provider, because it doesn't, and I really love that pills give us the opportunity to do that, each and every one of us. Chris, do you want to weigh in democratizing care or any ways to sort of help make it more accessible?
Well, I think that there's lots of ways that you can get this kind of care. And as a person who was trained in procedural abortion originally, I was a person that was always very pro anesthesia. I always felt that women had to suffer the pain of abortion because people were trying to make it cheaper, safer, outside of mainstream healthcare delivery. And one of the things that I did in my early practice was always give anesthesia. But I think that, Venny and I have talked about this, that the important thing is that what you do as an abortion provider by expanding the providers, by expanding the technology that gives us different ways to end a pregnancy, we're just expanding options. I don't think of it as demedicalizing, because I think we have wonderful technology now that we're able to do this with a medicine instead of a procedure, which increases access in such an enormous way. But I also feel that if I have a person who really doesn't want to experience the pain, then I want to be able to give her that option. And, everything that we've talked about, whether it's contraception or sexuality or pregnancy or abortion, it's all about making sure that we meet the patient where she is and make sure that we give her what she needs. And most of the people that Venny is serving don't have options. So they have the option to stay pregnant or not be pregnant through telemedicine. We used to think about this when I first started to learn about it as a harm reduction strategy, but I think that it's really unfair to call it harm. I think that many women who've been through this would tell you that it is a positive to be able to manage their own abortion at home at the time they want to do it without intervention from anybody else. So I think that's a beautiful concept of the abortion provider is the person who's also the abortion seeker. Just like I say, if you tell me you're going to honor the abortion providers, I want you to also mention that we're all beneficiaries, right?
We can all honor ourselves.
And we also need to look into ourselves and our history, our family history, to learn how abortion is something that has benefited all of us.
And, to this degree, the pro-abortion movement has been super slow on the uptake of talking about why this is okay, actually talking about abortion provision. And the anti-abortion movement has been able to insert their sort of scare tactics and what that is since the beginning of whenever this sort of activism started, pre-Roe, but also just as Roe passed in the United States. And so I'm wondering, for our listeners who are hearing this for the first time and they're like, wow, I have been fed so much garbage about how abortion by myself is unsafe, how I shouldn't do this, how this is reckless. I would love for y'all to weigh in just a little bit, and maybe we'll get a little wonky, maybe we won't, I don't know, but just letting folks know why it is that abortion is so safe.
There's a lot people don't understand about their bodies, and it's not limited to this, right?
Yes.
All the stigma, all the misinformation, it extends to everything female, because it's not just that people are uncomfortable with female sexual agency. You've explored that in your show many times. But I think that there's a discomfort with female agency, but there's also a cultural entitlement to women's uncompensated gestational labor. And we don't even actually quantify the risk. And there's a huge reluctance of the scientific community to quantify the immediate and long-term impact of pregnancy and birth, because if you had to acknowledge that, then you couldn't force people to do it against their will, right? But abortion, obviously, we all know, is much safer than any pregnancy. And we're not encouraged to focus on that, which is exactly what I focus on every day, is really making people understand the immediate and long-term impact. I call it the carnage of creation of pregnancy and childbirth. And if we acknowledge the reality of that, then anything that happens to a person as a result of their safe abortion is really insignificant from a risk standpoint.
As you were talking, I was thinking of some of these alternatives to abortion care, the kind of care that you both are talking about on this pod. In states with bans, they make people have C-sections for miscarriages. And I'm like, that's extra harm. So much more harmful than either form of abortion we've talked about on this pod.
Because abortion bans ultimately cause all of us to give substandard care at every single level. And it's not just to pregnant women, it's to all people. Because as soon as you start banning care, you can't have cancer care without abortion. You can't have any pregnancy care without abortion. You can't have state-of-the-art medicine, period, without abortion. So once you start banning care, everybody starts practicing substandard medicine everywhere.
Yeah, and I feel too like people forget, and a good reminder always is when you go to the doctor for anything that's wrong with you, if you are somebody who is of pregnancy age, the first thing they ask you is, are you pregnant? Because they want to know, like, what's happening to your body? What do you plan on having happen to your body as we explore why you're here today?
Yeah.
So one place I wanted to go is, we just talked to David Gunn Jr., whose father was killed walking from his car to his clinic, shot in the back 3 times in 1993 in Pensacola, Florida. And when we talk about abortion stigma, oftentimes we talk about what it means for the patient, but we often don't talk about what it means for those that provide abortion, right? Like, what does one who is in this business of helping folks access abortion care experiencing from your colleagues, from your family, from, the people in your social groups? How has that been for both of you? And have you experienced it yourselves?
I haven't actually a lot. I think it comes down to the fact that I'm so privileged to work for Women on Women. I work from this very safe and progressive country like Canada. But to your question, like where I draw inspiration from is really these fearless providers and feminist activists around the world that are taking a great deal of risks and just to ensure that people are having access to basic healthcare. For us, I think the biggest impediment at the moment and the biggest challenge is really like all the threats that are happening online. So many people are always asking, like, are you receiving threats or are people like approaching you? But it's really just the fight is moving to digital spaces and it's getting really sophisticated. So what we're seeing is not even like attacks directly on abortion, but access to information, which means that our websites are get taken down and people just don't find us. So the stigma is manifesting in very, very different and very subtle ways. But me as a person, I feel relatively safe and I just like look up to the activists around the world who are like on the ground doing this work and it's uncomparable for my work. Yeah.
I don't experience a great deal of threat or stigma in my work, but it has a lot to do with my geographic privilege. And I also, because I don't work for either the government or even for a hospital, I don't have to be constrained. So I work in my own sandbox for a reason, and it's a very privileged spot to work in. But I also feel that because of that I need to be able to ask people to ask more of themselves, to ask other medical professionals, to start being more proactive within their medical systems, to be really demand that we are allowed to practice evidence-based care regardless of the institutions that constrain us, to make sure that medical professionals resist the advice of hospital lawyers, that we don't get constrained by hospital administrators who tell us that we shouldn't practice what's best for our patients. So I feel like because I'm in a position of privilege, I have an obligation to do that kind of advocacy. And I also want to do, checkbook advocacy, that I'm in a position where I'm not dependent upon the hospital or the government to actually keep me employed. That also allows me to support small organizations like Women on Web or Abortion Access Front, and that all of us should be doing that. If you literally send $100 to somebody like Benny, you can actually change a person's life today, which is pretty amazing. There aren't that many things you can do with $100 that has such a great impact. So I feel like that is an obligation that I have because I'm not being stigmatized every day, and I'm not worried that someone's going to hurt me every day.
That reminds me of the way we also kind of frame women on web. Being able to work transnationally, it's a privilege, and a privilege to take certain risks that local groups cannot. So it's part of our mission, push the envelope, find legal loopholes, and just be committed to keeping the service open no matter what. And that's something that we are happy and willing to carry that risk over our shoulders, that then local feminist groups and providers can continue their work.
I think that's right. You both have been such perfect people to have on as we are, looking at this Abortion Provider Appreciation Week and showing just interesting models of care, supporting each other in the models of care that you're providing, and letting listeners know what abortion provision looks like, feels like, and why it's so important to our full emancipation. So I want to thank you for that. And as we wrap up, is there any final thoughts that you would love our listeners to know that maybe we didn't hit in the interview, that both of you were like, I would love you to know this. If there's one thing in the world I want you to take from this, it is what? And we'll start with you, Venny.
So related to stigma, I think it's really, really important to shift these narratives and remind people again and again that abortions have always happened. People have always had abortions, and they always happened way before abortion became something that was under the medical authority and legal regulations. I was recently in a midwife conference in Canada. There was somebody who wanted to really talk about destigmatization of abortion, and they were connecting abortion specifically with culture and kinship. And I pulled out the quote for this because I thought it was so beautiful. And she said that in an Indigenous community in Canada, they often say that together we chop wood, gather water together, bring on menses, cry together, and work together. And that's what it is. It's a community, it's a collective good, it's a community responsibility. And I think that's the way to really demystify and destigmatize abortions. It's always going to happen, no matter what.
Chris?
Just want everyone to really imagine a world in which women just get what they need, right? They just get it. And then when we imagine that world, we should just start demanding it, that we don't want to be so complacent and so stigmatized that we can't actually imagine a different kind of universe where we actually center everything around the patient. And I can't say this enough, to really just get everyone to query their own personal family history and really uncover how abortion care has helped them achieve their life's goals. Because I know that I have descended from at least 3 generations of abortion beneficiaries in totally different circumstances. And those are the only 3 generations that I know. So I'm sure every generation before me has also had some abortion in its history. And there's absolutely no way I could be here speaking to you today if I didn't have access to good pregnancy care, because I had a lot of it. And I feel so strongly that everyone needs to learn about it instead of keep it under the rug and not discuss it. This way, we'll just restore the public trust that we're going to give patients what they need. And we'll also make sure that all the professionals who could still have a voice if they use it well can actually demand that we be allowed to give our patients what they need.
Well, thank you both for being examples of that.
Yeah. Chris, I love the simplicity of you just saying, imagine a world where women can get what they need and then go live in it. And I feel like those are marching orders.
It's a really economically sound endeavor, right? So every time some guy sits and looks at you and says, but, I want to talk about economic issues, I don't want to talk about this women's stuff. This is a big economic issue. It impacts everybody for life. Once you've been pregnant and given birth, that determines how your level of poverty, your level of education. It determines everything about your freedom, and it determines everything for your family and your whole community. I know you guys know this, and I know your listeners know it, but you can't beat it enough, right? Just to really make it clear that this is a healthcare issue, an economic issue, and it's lifelong. It doesn't ever go away.
It's so true. Benny, where can people find Women on Web and learn more about you and donate and support you in all of your work?
womenonweb.org. That's where the consultation sits. That's where you find more information about the service, but just abortion pills in itself. If you're having an abortion, you've maybe self-sourced your own medication, you can go onto the website and see how to use them. And that's where you can also donate towards our course if you're willing.
Thanks. And Chris, is there anything that you want to give a shout out to or a plug to?
I just want everyone to find out who your local abortion provider is and support them, no matter who they are. If it's a telemedicine abortion provider, if it's somebody with an independent clinic, if it's the only doctor or midwife nurse in your town that's actually taking care of people who need abortions. And if you don't know who it is, then find out who your local abortion fund is, because you can actually have such an impact by making sure that you support all of these organizations.
Well, thank you both for joining us on this very important week. It was just amazing to talk to you both, and thank you for everything you do.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
They were so great. And as Dr. Creatura said, you can always donate to Abortion Access Front at aafront.org, and also donate and follow Women on Web. And you can follow Women on Web on social at Abortion Pill with 1 L. As always, these links and information will be in the show notes, and you can find the best, most up-to-the-minute resources on accessing abortion care and funding for your care on our website, aafront.org. Our Charlie chatbot on the bottom right will walk anyone anywhere in the country through their options and resources for abortion.
Everyone, we do this show because pro-abortion news is not given enough attention in the media. So help us spread the word and show us some love by liking, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star rating. Every little bit helps us reach more listeners.
It's so true. We unpacked so much today, and I feel like I heard a lot of just wisdom bombs dropped. Was there anything, Moji, that you were like, oh my God, yes, that?
You know, I really loved when Chris was talking about the unpaid labor that pregnancy-capable people are sort of required to do because no one thinks about how valuable that labor is.
I think that's true. And I really loved just talking about community care, even from a doula's perspective. Even David Gunn just talked about how we need to come together and protect each other. And Chris even, just talked about what if we lived in a world where, women got what they deserved and then we demand it. So I think the theme is, we are our own best advocates and we are the ones we're waiting for. I hate to say everything that sounds like it should be fucking stitched on a pillow, but I do believe that those things are real. I'm with you.
Yeah, I think those things are real. And I think in the conversations we've had today, you can find lots of models of where you can either step in and do some work and help, or just how you can find the care you need and think about how your care would look like.
That's right. I hope you love the show.
I hope you do too, because that was our show and we loved it. And I want to thank everyone for listening. And thanks again to our guests, David Gunn Jr., Dr. Victoria Williams, Dr. Chris Creatora, and Viniala Ciarua.
Please, please, please support these amazing providers with one of our AAF programs like Adopt a Clinic or Expose Fake Clinics. And again, you can find out how to do all of the AAF support on our website at aafront.org.
Now, I know we made you smarter today.
I'm smarter.
I'm smarter. And I'll bet we made you laugh as well because, Liz, we're funny.
We're funny.
And so, listeners, show us some love by liking, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star rating. And if you really want to go extra,
Join our Patreon.
yes, join the Patreon. All pledges support this pod and all of our activism at Abortion Access Front.
That's right. Work like bringing you all the repro news and info every day on social media at Abortion Front. With your help, we can get more people to learn about this assault on reproductive access and then get people to work. So again, pledge a Patreon at patreon.com/feministbuzzkills and follow us across all the social platforms.
Now that we've got you informed, let's get you activated. Check out our awesome Operation Save Abortion trainings at operationsaveabortion.com. You can get an abortion activist glow up, and you can learn about all the areas abortion providers and patients need your help.
And while you're there, poke around our super cool activist calendar. It's full of local and national actions and educational opportunities, so you can dive right in. Again, all of that is at OperationSaveAbortion.com.
But wait, there's more. If you want more ways to get involved, sign up to volunteer. We need you. You can go to our website, aafront.org, fill out the volunteer form, and let's figure it out together.
That's right. And boy, if you thought this show was good, next week is awesome. We've got comedian, actor, best-selling author, and hilarious social media follow, Phoebe Robinson, joining us. She's going to bring us some much-needed outrage and belly laughs.
She's so funny. And we break down the BS and stigma around menopause with the host of the Menopunks podcast, filmmaker and activist Alicia J. Rose, and menopause specialist in the Northwest, Dr. Aoife O'Sullivan, who co-hosts the menopause podcast, The Dusty Muffins, which is in fact my drag name.
Look, my old, dry, atrophying vagina is so excited for next week's show. I cannot hardly wait.
Let's dust our muffins for this, Liz.
Oh my God. If you dust mine, I will dust yours. I cannot wait. And lastly, but not leastly, the Feminist Buzzkills podcast is edited and produced by Remy DeTarnay and Jin Moon for Abortion Access Front. Y'all have a great Abortion Provider Appreciation Day. Go out and be the activist you want to see in the world and support a clinic this week.
Feminist Buzzkills, the podcast from Abortion Access Front. New episodes drop Friday. When BS is poppin', we pop off. And if you want to support our podcast and all the work of Abortion Access Front, like, subscribe, and join our Patreon at patreon.com/feministbuzzkills.